Dr. Tobias Grimm had always prided himself on maintaining scientific objectivity, but staring at the quantum resonance readings sprawled across his workstation, he felt something uncomfortably close to nausea creeping up his throat. The interdimensional viewing portal hummed behind him with that particular frequency that made his teeth ache, and for the third time in 10 minutes, he found himself questioning whether some discoveries were worth making. The calculations have to be wrong. Kes Halfmoon's voice carried that peculiar harmonic undertone that all Vithrak possessed when they were deeply troubled. Her six-fingered hands moved across her own console with the precise, almost musical gestures her species used when processing complex data. Tobias, these readings suggest an impossible acceleration of technological development. Tobias rubbed his eyes, which had been burning from staring at dimensional readouts for the past 14 hours. The Galactic Research Ethics Committee had approved their interdimensional observation project 6 months ago, with the understanding that they would be conducting passive surveillance of parallel civilizations. Simple anthropological research, they had called it. Document how different evolutionary pressures might have shaped sapient development across dimensional barriers. Clean, academic work that would contribute to the growing body of knowledge about consciousness and civilization. What they had discovered instead was making him wonder if some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. "Show me the timeline analysis again," he said, already knowing he would regret asking. Kes manipulated her holographic display, and the three-dimensional projection flickered to life between them. The data hung in the air like an accusation, each data point representing another impossibility that their instruments insisted was absolutely real. Dimensional designation Ecominus 47, Kes began, her academic training taking over despite the obvious distress in her posture. Initial sapient emergence approximately 200,000 years ago, consistent with standard evolutionary models. First evidence of tool use, agricultural development, early civilization formation, all within expected parameters. She gestured to the early portion of the timeline, where familiar patterns of development traced predictable curves. But then, the projection shifted, focusing on the most recent 2 centuries of Ecominus 47's history. The development curve didn't just accelerate, it practically went vertical. First contact with the Zephyrian Trade Consortium occurred 187 years ago, Kes continued, her voice growing quieter. Based on quantum archaeological reconstruction, the humans of Ecominus 47 went from their first faster-than-light communication to controlling 7 star systems in less than 50 years. Tobias felt that familiar chill that had been haunting him for weeks. In their own dimension, the Zephyrian Trade Consortium represented one of the most militarily and economically powerful civilizations in known space. They had been expanding their influence for over 3 millennia, commanded fleets that could reduce planets to rubble, and maintained strict protocols about exactly which species were permitted to achieve spacefaring status. The idea of any newly contacted civilization challenging them, let alone defeating them, should have been absurd. And the current status? Tobias asked, though he had memorized these figures. Ecominus 47 humans currently maintain administrative control over 43% of what corresponds to our galaxy's inhabited systems. Kes paused, her breathing apparatus cycling more rapidly than usual. They have established what they term conservation zones for approximately 70 different sapient species. Conservation zones, the euphemism had been bothering Tobias for days. He had spent considerable time analyzing the sociological implications of the term, cross-referencing it with human linguistic patterns and cultural development theories. In every context he could identify, conservation implied protection of something vulnerable, something that needed to be preserved because it could not survive on its own. The Ecominus 47 humans had apparently decided that 70 sapient species needed their protection. The Zephyrian analysis is what troubles me most, Tobias admitted, calling up his own data set. According to our observations, Ecominus 47 humans have converted the entire Zephyrian military fleet into what appears to be deep space mining and construction equipment. The implications of that single fact had been keeping him awake at night. The Zephyrians of Ecominus 47 were, according to every measurable parameter, identical to the Zephyrians of his own dimension. Same evolutionary background, same technological development patterns, same military doctrines that had kept them as galactic superpowers for millennia. Yet somehow, in less than 2 centuries, the humans of Ecominus 47 had not only defeated them, but had apparently convinced them to repurpose their entire civilization toward industrial labor. Tobias, Kes said carefully, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. He looked up from his data, noting the way her skin had shifted to the mottled blue-gray pattern that indicated serious anxiety in her species. In your professional assessment, based on everything we have observed about Ecominus 47, what do you believe would happen if the humans of that dimension became aware of our observation portal? The question hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Tobias had been avoiding thinking about it directly, but the concern had been growing in the back of his mind with each new piece of data they collected. Their observation portal was supposed to be completely passive, a one-way window that allowed them to study parallel dimensions without any possibility of detection or interaction. But the humans of Ecominus 47 had achieved technological supremacy over civilizations that should have been capable of detecting interdimensional surveillance, if they had developed that level of sophistication. A soft chime from the portal array interrupted his thoughts. Kes moved to the monitoring station, her movements sharp with sudden alertness. Tobias, she said, and her voice carried a note he had never heard before. We have a problem. The readings on her screen showed something that made his blood run cold. The quantum resonance patterns that indicated passive observation were shifting, becoming more complex, more interactive. The dimensional barrier is destabilizing, Kes reported, her training allowing her to maintain professional calm even as her skin continued shifting through increasingly distressed color patterns. Something on the Ecominus 47 side is actively scanning the portal's signature. Tobias stared at the readings, watching as the portal's passive monitoring systems registered what could only be described as active examination from the other side. Someone in Ecominus 47 had not only detected their observation portal but was now actively investigating it. How long before he began, before they established two-way contact, Kes finished. Based on these readings, I would estimate less than 6 hours. The laboratory fell silent except for the increasingly agitated humming of the portal array. Somewhere in Ecominus 47, the humans who had conquered nearly half their galaxy had just discovered that someone was watching them. And now they were looking back. Dr. Tobias Grimm had always prided himself on maintaining scientific objectivity, but staring at the quantum resonance readings sprawled across his workstation, he felt something uncomfortably close to nausea creeping up his throat. The interdimensional viewing portal hummed behind him with that particular frequency that made his teeth ache. And for the third time in 10 minutes, he found himself questioning whether some discoveries were worth making. The calculations have to be wrong. Kes Halfmoon's voice carried that peculiar harmonic undertone that all Vithrak possessed when they were deeply troubled. Her six-fingered hands moved across her own console with the precise, almost musical gestures her species used when processing complex data. Tobias, these readings suggest an impossible acceleration of technological development. Tobias rubbed his eyes, which had been burning from staring at dimensional readouts for the past 14 hours. The Galactic Research Ethics Committee had approved their interdimensional observation project 6 months ago, with the understanding that they would be conducting passive surveillance of parallel civilizations. Simple anthropological research, they had called it. Document how different evolutionary pressures might have shaped sapient development across dimensional barriers. Clean, academic work that would contribute to the growing body of knowledge about consciousness and civilization. What they had discovered instead was making him wonder if some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Show me the timeline analysis again, he said, already knowing he would regret asking. Kes manipulated her holographic display, and the three-dimensional projection flickered to life between them. The data hung in the air like an accusation, each data point representing another impossibility that their instruments insisted was absolutely real. Dimensional designation Ecominus 47, Kes began, her academic training taking over despite the obvious distress in her posture. Initial sapient emergence approximately 200,000 years ago, consistent with standard evolutionary models. First evidence of tool use, agricultural development, early civilization formation, all within expected parameters. She gestured to the early portion of the timeline, where familiar patterns of development traced predictable curves. But then, The projection shifted, focusing on the most recent 2 centuries of Ecominus 47's history. The development curve didn't just accelerate, it practically went vertical. First contact with the Zephyrian Trade Consortium occurred 187 years ago, Kess continued, her voice growing quieter. Based on quantum archaeological reconstruction, the humans of Ecominus 47 went from their first faster-than-light communication to controlling 7 star systems in less than 50 years. Tobias felt that familiar chill that had been haunting him for weeks. In their own dimension, the Zephyrian Trade Consortium represented one of the most militarily and economically powerful civilizations in known space. They had been expanding their influence for over 3 millennia, commanded fleets that could reduce planets to rubble, and maintained strict protocols about exactly which species were permitted to achieve spacefaring status. The idea of any newly contacted civilization challenging them, let alone defeating them, should have been absurd. And the current status? Tobias asked, though he had memorized these figures. Ecominus 47 humans currently maintain administrative control over 43% of what corresponds to our galaxy's inhabited systems. Kess paused, her breathing apparatus cycling more rapidly than usual. They have established what they term conservation zones for approximately 70 different sapient species. Conservation zones, the euphemism had been bothering Tobias for days. He had spent considerable time analyzing the sociological implications of the term, cross-referencing it with human linguistic patterns and cultural development theories. In every context he could identify, conservation implied protection of something vulnerable, something that needed to be preserved because it could not survive on its own. The Ecominus 47 humans had apparently decided that 70 sapient species needed their protection. The Zephyrian analysis is what troubles me most, Tobias admitted, calling up his own data set. According to our observations, Ecominus 47 humans have converted the entire Zephyrian military fleet into what appears to be deep space mining and construction equipment. The implications of that single fact had been keeping him awake at night. The Zephyrians of Ecominus 47 were, according to every measurable parameter, identical to the Zephyrians of his own dimension. Same evolutionary background, same technological development patterns, same military doctrines that had kept them as galactic superpowers for millennia. Yet somehow, in less than 2 centuries, the humans of Ecominus 47 had not only defeated them, but had apparently convinced them to repurpose their entire civilization toward industrial labor. Tobias, Kess said carefully, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. He looked up from his data, noting the way her skin had shifted to the mottled blue-gray pattern that indicated serious anxiety in her species. In your professional assessment, based on everything we have observed about Ecominus 47, what do you believe would happen if the humans of that dimension became aware of our observation portal? The question hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Tobias had been avoiding thinking about it directly, but the concern had been growing in the back of his mind with each new piece of data they collected. Their observation portal was supposed to be completely passive, a one-way window that allowed them to study parallel dimensions without any possibility of detection or interaction. But the humans of Ecominus 47 had achieved technological supremacy over civilizations that should have been capable of detecting interdimensional surveillance. If they had developed that level of sophistication. A soft chime from the portal array interrupted his thoughts. Kess moved to the monitoring station, her movements sharp with sudden alertness. Tobias, she said, and her voice carried a note he had never heard before. We have a problem. The readings on her screen showed something that made his blood run cold. The quantum resonance patterns that indicated passive observation were shifting, becoming more complex, more interactive. The dimensional barrier is destabilizing, Kess reported, her training allowing her to maintain professional calm even as her skin continued shifting through increasingly distressed color patterns. Something on the Ecominus 47 side is actively scanning the portal's signature. Tobias stared at the readings, watching as the portal's passive monitoring systems registered what could only be described as active examination from the other side. Someone in Ecominus 47 had not only detected their observation portal but was now actively investigating it. How long before he began, before they established two-way contact, Kess finished. Based on these readings, I would estimate less than 6 hours. The laboratory fell silent except for the increasingly agitated humming of the portal array. Somewhere in Ecominus 47, the humans who had conquered nearly half their galaxy had just discovered that someone was watching them. And now they were looking back. Tobias moved with the kind of deliberate calm that came from years of laboratory emergencies, but his hands trembled as he activated the secure communication array. The priority alert that appeared on his screen carried the distinctive encoding that indicated he was about to ruin several very important people's day. Dr. Grimm to Station Command. We need an immediate consultation with the Dimensional Research Ethics Board and, he paused, realizing the absurdity of following normal protocols when facing something that had no precedent in galactic history. And possibly the Defense Council. Cass had moved to the secondary monitoring station, her 6 arms working in perfect coordination as she attempted to trace the source of the scanning signals coming from Ecominus 47. The readings she was generating made Tobias's academic mind rebel against accepting what the instruments were telling them. Tobias, look at this. Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. The scanning pattern isn't random. It's methodical, systematic. They're mapping our portal's quantum signature with a precision that suggests they understand our technology better than we do. He moved to her station, studying the data streams that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The Ecominus 47 signals weren't just detecting their portal. They were analyzing its construction, reverse engineering its operating principles, and apparently documenting its power source configuration. How is that possible? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Because they've encountered interdimensional observation technology before, Kess replied, her skin now cycling through the deep purple patterns that indicated her species' equivalent of existential dread. This isn't their first contact with dimensional surveillance. They know exactly what they're looking at because they've dealt with it before. The implications hit Tobias like a physical blow. If the Ecominus 47 humans had previous experience with interdimensional observation, it meant other civilizations had tried to study them. The question that made his throat tighten was simple and terrifying. What had happened to those other observers? A new series of alerts cascaded across their monitoring systems. The portal's passive sensors were detecting massive energy fluctuations on the Ecominus 47 side, patterns that suggested the rapid deployment of sophisticated technological systems. They're building something, Kess reported, her voice carrying the clinical detachment she used when discussing particularly horrifying data. The energy signatures suggest a construction project of significant scale, and it's being assembled in direct proximity to our portal's dimensional anchor point. Tobias pulled up the comparative analysis he had been working on for weeks, the document that had been gradually destroying his peace of mind. The file contained detailed breakdowns of how Ecominus 47 humans had approached previous challenges to their expanding influence. Kess, look at the pattern recognition analysis for their historical responses to perceived threats. She accessed his files, and Tobias watched her skin shift through several color changes as she processed the information. The Ecominus 47 humans didn't simply defeat opposing forces. They systematically dismantled entire civilizations' capacity for resistance, then reorganized those civilizations around principles that served human interests. But the reorganization wasn't imposed through force alone. The conquered species appeared to genuinely embrace their new roles, often demonstrating what could only be described as enthusiasm for their positions within human-dominated systems. Tobias, Kess said slowly, according to this analysis, they don't just win conflicts, they make their former enemies want to help them win. That was the part that had been haunting his sleep. The Ecominus 47 humans didn't rule through fear or oppression. Every indication suggested that the 70 species in their conservation zones were there voluntarily, that the Zephyrians had chosen to convert their military fleet to industrial equipment, that the entire galactic reorganization had occurred with the enthusiastic cooperation of its participants. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission on their secure channel. Station Commander Eric's Torvin's image appeared on the communication screen, her expression carrying the particular type of controlled panic that senior administrators developed when facing unprecedented crises. Dr. Grimm, I've reviewed your preliminary report, and I need you to tell me that your readings are the result of instrument malfunction. I wish I could, Commander. Our instruments are functioning perfectly. The Ecominus 47 humans have detected our observation portal and are actively investigating it. Commander Torvin's mandibles clicked in the rapid pattern that indicated deep stress in her species. The Defense Council has been briefed on your findings regarding Ecominus 47's expansion patterns. Dr. Grimm, they want you to shut down the portal immediately. Tobias looked at Kess, then back at the commander's image. Commander, I'm not certain that's possible at this point. The dimensional barrier has been compromised. Shutting down our portal might not prevent them from maintaining contact. What do you mean? Kess stepped forward, her color patterns now a steady deep blue that indicated she was accessing her species' equivalent of emergency calm. Commander, based on the energy signatures we're detecting, the Ecominus 47 humans appear to be constructing their own portal system. If our analysis is correct, they'll be capable of initiating contact from their side within the next 4 hours. The communication screen flickered as Commander Torvin processed this information. When her image stabilized, her expression had shifted to something Tobias had never seen before, the look of someone confronting a problem that had no solution. Dr. Grimm, you need to understand something. The Defense Council has been analyzing your reports on Ecominus 47's expansion patterns. They've identified what they believe to be a clear threat to our dimensional stability. Tobias felt his stomach drop. What kind of threat? The kind where a civilization that has conquered half their galaxy in 2 centuries decides that other dimensions represent unexplored territory. The laboratory fell silent except for the increasingly complex harmonics coming from the portal array. Somewhere in Ecominus 47, the most successful military force in known existence was preparing to make contact with a dimension they had never encountered before. And based on their historical patterns, contact was typically followed by a very efficient integration process. Kess's workstation erupted in a cascade of alerts. Her hands moved across the controls with desperate precision as she tried to interpret the flood of data streaming through their sensors. Tobias, she said, her voice carrying a note of wonder and terror, they're not just building a portal, they're building a gateway large enough for ship transit. The readings on her screen showed construction signatures that indicated something massive taking shape on the Ecominus 47 side. Not a communication device or a small observation portal, but an interdimensional passage capable of accommodating what appeared to be industrial-scale traffic. How long? Tobias asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. 2 hours, maybe less. Commander Torvin's image flickered back to life on their communication screen. Dr. Grimm, the Defense Council has issued evacuation orders for this sector. All research personnel are to be relocated to minimum safe distance immediately. Commander, what's minimum safe distance from an interdimensional incursion? The pause before her answer told him everything he needed to know. We're not entirely sure, Doctor. This situation falls outside all existing protocols. As if summoned by her words, a new sound began emanating from the portal array. Not the familiar hum of their observation equipment, but something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like, "Is that music?" Kess asked. Tobias listened more carefully to the complex harmonics emerging from the portal. The patterns were too structured, too intentional to be random energy fluctuations. Someone on the Ecominus 47 side was transmitting organized sound patterns through the dimensional barrier. They're trying to communicate, he realized, but the transmission method. His blood ran cold as the implications became clear. The Ecominus 47 humans weren't just sending a message. They were demonstrating that they could manipulate the dimensional barrier itself as a communication medium, using their reality's fundamental structure as a transmission array. The music grew more complex, more beautiful, and infinitely more terrifying. Because if they could use dimensional physics to send music, they could probably use it to send other things as well. And based on everything they had observed about Ecominus 47, those other things were likely to arrive very, very soon. The music streaming through the dimensional barrier had evolved into something that defied every principle Tobias understood about interdimensional physics. What had begun as simple harmonic patterns now carried layers of complexity that suggested the Ecominus 47 humans weren't just manipulating quantum resonance frequencies. They were rewriting the fundamental properties of dimensional space to serve as their communication medium. Kess, are you recording this transmission method? She nodded, her movements sharp with professional focus despite the obvious terror in her color patterns. The mathematical implications alone are. Tobias, they're not just sending signals through the barrier. They're restructuring the barrier itself into a more efficient communication array. Dr. Grimm stared at the readings, watching as the dimensional membrane between their realities underwent systematic modification. The Ecominus 47 humans were treating the fabric of interdimensional space like construction material, reshaping it with the casual efficiency of engineers improving a flawed design. Commander Torvin's voice crackled through their communication array, distorted by the increasing interference from the portal modifications. Dr. Grimm, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout this sector. Whatever they're doing over there is affecting local space-time. Tobias pulled up the gravitational analysis, and what he saw made his hands shake. The Ecominus 47 construction project was generating spatial distortions that extended far beyond the immediate portal area. They weren't just building an interdimensional gateway, they were engineering modifications to the underlying structure of reality itself. Commander, I need you to contact the Galactic Physics Institute immediately. What we're observing suggests the Ecominus 47 humans have achieved a level of dimensional engineering that shouldn't be theoretically possible. Dr. Grimm, the Institute's senior physicists, are already reviewing your data. Their preliminary assessment is that your instruments must be malfunctioning because the readings you're generating violate several fundamental laws of physics. Kess looked up from her workstation, her expression carrying the particular type of academic excitement that emerged when confronting impossible data. Tobias, I don't think our physics are wrong. I think Ecominus 47 physics are different. She transferred her analysis to the main display, and Tobias felt his worldview shift as he processed what she was showing him. The quantum signatures from Ecominus 47 didn't just suggest advanced technology. They suggested that the fundamental constants governing physical reality operated according to different parameters in that dimension. Are you suggesting that the laws of physics themselves are different in Ecominus 47? Not different, Kess corrected, her academic precision cutting through the chaos around them. Expanded. Everything we consider impossible appears to be merely challenging from their perspective. The implications were staggering. If the Ecominus 47 humans had evolved in a reality where the boundaries between possible and impossible were more flexible, then their technological capabilities might be limited only by their imagination and available resources. And based on their galactic conquest patterns, they had never demonstrated any shortage of either. A new series of alerts cascaded across their monitoring systems. The portal array began generating readings that made Tobias question whether he was still operating in rational reality. They're not building one gateway, Cass reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. The construction signatures indicate multiple interdimensional access points being established simultaneously. Tobias stared at the data, trying to process the scale of what he was seeing. The Ecominus 47 humans weren't planning a simple contact scenario. They were preparing for systematic interdimensional access, with infrastructure that suggested permanent integration between realities. How many access points? 17 that I can definitively identify, possibly more that our instruments can't detect yet. The music streaming through the portal shifted again, becoming more structured, more intentional. Tobias realized with growing horror that the harmonic patterns weren't random artistic expression. They were mathematical proofs, demonstrations of theoretical principles that proved the Ecominus 47 human's mastery over concepts his own civilization barely understood. Commander, he called through the communication array, the Ecominus 47 humans appear to be preparing for large-scale dimensional integration. This isn't first contact anymore. This is preparation for systematic colonization. Static filled the channel before Commander Torvin's voice returned, strained and distant. Dr. Grimm, the Defense Council has authorized emergency protocols. You have 15 minutes to gather essential data before mandatory evacuation. 15 minutes. Tobias looked around the laboratory that had been his professional home for 6 years, at the instruments that had revealed the existence of a human civilization so advanced that their own species looked primitive by comparison. 15 minutes to document the most significant discovery in galactic history before running away from its implications. Kess, download everything. Every reading, every analysis, every theoretical framework we've developed. If we're evacuating, we need to ensure this information survives. She was already working, her multiple arms coordinating complex data transfers with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years managing comprehensive research projects. But as she worked, her color patterns shifted to something Tobias had never seen before, a deep, pulsing amber that indicated her species' response to existential terror. Tobias looked at the temporal analysis. He pulled up her data, and what he saw made him understand why evacuation protocols had been authorized. The Ecominus 47 construction project wasn't following normal temporal patterns. The massive engineering work that should have required months or years to complete was being accomplished in hours. They're manipulating time flow, he realized. Not just manipulating it, Kess corrected, they're optimizing it. The construction is occurring in accelerated temporal fields while maintaining perfect coordination across 17 different project sites. The Ecominus 47 humans had apparently decided that the normal pace of interdimensional engineering was inconveniently slow, so they had simply modified the flow of time to make their work more efficient. A new sound emerged from the portal array, deeper than the musical transmissions, more rhythmic. It took Tobias several moments to recognize what he was hearing, the synchronized movement of massive machinery operating across multiple dimensional access points. They're not just building gateways, he whispered. They're building infrastructure, industrial infrastructure. Kess's workstation exploded with new data as her instruments detected the arrival of something unprecedented. The readings showed massive energy signatures moving through the dimensional barriers, but the quantum patterns indicated something far more complex than simple machinery. Tobias, she said, her voice barely audible above the growing harmonic resonance from the portal, those aren't just machines. Those are ecosystems. The data streaming across her displays showed biological signatures integrated with technological systems in ways that suggested the Ecominus 47 humans didn't distinguish between engineering and biology. They were transporting entire interconnected systems of life and technology through dimensional space, preparing to establish permanent settlements in previously uncontacted realities. And they were doing it with the casual efficiency of a species that had performed this type of interdimensional colonization many times before. How long have they been doing this? Tobias asked, though he suspected the answer would destroy whatever peace of mind he had left. Based on the technological integration patterns, I estimate they've been engaging in systematic interdimensional expansion for at least 70 years. 70 years. The Ecominus 47 humans hadn't just conquered their own galaxy, they had been quietly expanding into other realities for the better part of a century. The question that made Tobias's throat constrict was obvious and horrifying. How many other dimensions had already been integrated into their expanding civilization? The portal array began generating a new sound, something that vibrated through the laboratory floor and made his bones ache. But as he listened more carefully, Tobias realized it wasn't machinery or construction noise. It was voices. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, singing in harmony across 17 different interdimensional access points. The Ecominus 47 humans were celebrating, and their celebration was just beginning. The harmonic celebration streaming through the portal array abruptly shifted into something that made Tobias's academic mind struggle to process what he was experiencing. The voices weren't just singing, they were harmonizing across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously, creating musical structures that existed in several realities at once. Kess, please tell me you're recording this acoustic phenomenon. I'm trying, but our instruments weren't designed to capture interdimensional musical theory. Her color patterns had shifted to a rapid cycling between deep blue and silver, indicating her species' response to encountering concepts that exceeded their cognitive framework. Tobias, the mathematical complexity of what they're doing with sound alone suggests a level of consciousness integration that we don't have adequate terminology to describe. Dr. Grimm realized with growing certainty that they were no longer observing the Ecominus 47 humans. They were being observed by them. The music, the construction, the systematic modification of dimensional barriers, all of it was being performed for an audience. The Ecominus 47 humans knew exactly who was watching and had deliberately designed their interdimensional engineering project as a demonstration. Dr. Grimm, Commander Torvin's voice carried through their communication array with the flat tone of someone delivering information they didn't want to believe. We've received communication from the Galactic Defense Council. The Ecominus 47 dimensional incursion has been detected by monitoring stations throughout this sector. They're requesting your immediate assessment of potential defensive strategies. Tobias stared at the data streams flowing across his workstation, at the readings that documented technological capabilities so far beyond his own civilizations, understanding that the concept of defense seemed almost quaint. Commander, based on our observations, the Ecominus 47 humans have achieved technological integration with fundamental physical forces in ways that make conventional defensive strategies irrelevant. They're not invading our dimension, they're optimizing it. The silence that followed his statement stretched long enough that he wondered if the communication link had failed. When Commander Torvin's voice returned, it carried a note of desperate hope. Dr. Grimm, are you saying they might not be hostile? Before Tobias could answer, the portal array generated a sound unlike anything they had recorded before. Not music, not machinery, but something that his mind interpreted as language despite being transmitted through quantum fluctuations in dimensional space itself. Greetings, colleagues. The voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, with pronunciation that suggested native fluency and an accent that conveyed warmth, professional competence, and the kind of casual confidence that came from someone accustomed to solving complex problems efficiently. Kess's workstation erupted in cascading alerts as her instruments detected the impossible. Direct communication through a supposedly passive observation portal, using transmission methods that bypassed every known principle of interdimensional physics. Dr. Tobias Grimm and Dr. Kess Halfmoon, I presume, the voice continued, carrying a note of polite inquiry that made the hair on Tobias's arms stand up. We've been monitoring your research with considerable interest. Quite impressive work, actually. Your dimensional observation methodology shows remarkable innovation given the technological constraints you're operating under. Tobias found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. How are you communicating with us? Oh, fairly standard interdimensional communication protocols once you understand the underlying quantum architecture. We modified your portal's passive observation array to support two-way data exchange. Nothing too complex. We've implemented similar upgrades on approximately 47 other observation portals we've encountered over the years. The casual mention of 47 other portals made Tobias's stomach drop. 47 other civilizations had been conducting interdimensional surveillance of Ecominus 47, and the humans had not only detected all of them but had been actively engaging with their observers for years. What happened to the other observers? Kess asked, her academic training allowing her to maintain professional composure despite her obvious terror. Happened to them? The voice carried a note of genuine confusion. They're integrated into our research networks now. Quite valuable collaborators, actually. Dr. Zinth Valdrin from Dimension Ecominus 23 has made remarkable contributions to our temporal engineering projects, and the Crystalline Collective from Ecominus 31 helped us develop our current biological integration technologies. Integrated into research networks. Tobias realized with growing horror that the Ecominus 47 humans' expansion pattern extended beyond simple galactic conquest. They were systematically incorporating other civilizations into their projects, transforming potential threats into enthusiastic collaborators. I should introduce myself properly, the voice continued with the kind of professional courtesy that belonged in an academic conference rather than a first contact scenario. Dr. Maya Blackwood, Senior Director of Interdimensional Integration Projects. I've been following your work on parallel civilization development theory, Dr. Grimm. Your analysis of our expansion patterns shows remarkable insight, though you've underestimated our timeline by approximately 37%. The portal array began generating new harmonics as additional construction signatures appeared on their monitoring systems. But these weren't the massive industrial projects they had been observing. These were smaller, more precise modifications occurring in their immediate vicinity. Dr. Blackwood, Tobias managed, what are you building in our dimensional space? Research facilities primarily. Conference areas, collaborative workspaces, cultural exchange centers, standard integration infrastructure. We've found that interdimensional cooperation proceeds much more smoothly when we establish proper meeting facilities. Kess pulled up the local construction readings, and what she found made her color patterns shift to solid white, her species' response to encountering something so far outside normal experience that their standard emotional responses had ceased to function. Tobias, she whispered, they're building an interdimensional research campus, here, around our station. The implications hit him like a physical blow. The Ecominus 47 humans weren't planning to invade their reality or conquer their civilization. They were planning to recruit them. The entire interdimensional engineering project was designed to facilitate collaboration, to make integration as smooth and appealing as possible. Dr. Grimm, Dr. Halfmoon, Dr. Blackwood's voice continued, carrying the tone of someone making a reasonable professional offer. We'd like to invite you to participate in a preliminary cultural exchange program. Nothing overwhelming, just an opportunity to tour our facilities, meet some of our interdimensional research teams, and discuss potential collaboration opportunities. What if we decline? Tobias asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Decline? Dr. Blackwood sounded genuinely puzzled. I'm not sure I understand. Why would you want to decline? We're offering access to technological capabilities that will advance your civilization by several thousand years, collaboration opportunities with the most advanced research networks in known interdimensional space, and the chance to contribute to projects that will benefit billions of sapient beings across multiple realities. The terrifying thing was that Dr. Blackwood sounded completely sincere. She genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would refuse an offer that was, from her perspective, obviously beneficial for everyone involved. Dr. Blackwood, Kess said carefully, what happens to civilizations that prefer to maintain their independence? The pause before her answer was long enough that Tobias wondered if they had lost communication. When Dr. Blackwood's voice returned, it carried a note of gentle sadness. That's really not how interdimensional integration works, Dr. Halfmoon. Independence is a concept that becomes irrelevant once you understand the scope of what we're trying to accomplish. But please don't worry about philosophical frameworks right now. Come see what we've built, meet our teams, experience what collaborative interdimensional civilization actually feels like. The portal array chimed with a soft, welcoming tone as new energy signatures appeared on their instruments. Not threatening, not overwhelming, just a gentle indication that passage between dimensions had become available. The gateway is ready whenever you'd like to visit, Dr. Blackwood said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone extending hospitality to valued colleagues. Take your time, gather whatever research materials you'd like to bring, and step through when you're ready. Tobias stared at the portal, at the readings that showed a carefully constructed interdimensional passage designed for safe, comfortable travel. Everything about the invitation was reasonable, professional, and utterly terrifying, because he was beginning to understand that the most successful predators in interdimensional space didn't conquer their prey. They convinced their prey to volunteer. Commander Torvin's voice crackled through the communication array with the desperate edge of someone watching their carefully constructed protocols disintegrate in real time. Dr. Grimm, the Defense Council, is demanding an immediate status report. What is the current threat assessment? Tobias stared at the portal, at the gentle, welcoming energy signatures that indicated a passage designed with meticulous attention to the safety and comfort of interdimensional travelers. The readings showed atmospheric composition perfectly adjusted for both human and Vithrak physiology, gravity fields calibrated to minimize disorientation, and even ambient lighting frequencies optimized to reduce stress responses in multiple species. Commander, he said slowly, I'm not certain threat is the appropriate classification anymore. What do you mean? Before Tobias could answer, Dr. Blackwood's voice returned through the portal array, carrying the patient tone of someone accustomed to addressing reasonable concerns from new collaborators. Commander Torvin, I assume we've been monitoring your communication channels purely for coordination purposes, you understand. Would you like to join Dr. Grimm and Dr. Halfmoon for the preliminary tour? I think you'd find our administrative integration protocols quite interesting from a management perspective. The casual mention of monitoring their secure communications should have been alarming, but Dr. Blackwood's tone made it sound like a standard professional courtesy rather than an invasion of privacy. Tobias realized that this, too, was part of the pattern. The Ecominus-47 humans didn't sneak or hide their capabilities, they demonstrated them openly while framing everything in terms of mutual benefit and collaboration. Kess had been running continuous analysis on the portal's energy signatures, and her findings were generating data that made Tobias question everything he thought he understood about interdimensional physics. Tobias looked at the temporal analysis of the gateway construction. He reviewed her data and felt his worldview shift again. The interdimensional passage hadn't been built in response to their conversation with Dr. Blackwood. According to the quantum archaeological signatures, it had been constructed 3 days ago. They knew we would agree to visit before we had even made the decision, he whispered. Not exactly, Dr. Blackwood interjected, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone correcting a minor misunderstanding. We built the gateway because we knew you would eventually want to visit, but the timing of your decision was entirely up to you. We've simply learned that most researchers prefer having infrastructure ready when they make their choice rather than waiting for construction after the fact. The implications were staggering. The Ecominus-47 humans didn't just plan for multiple contingencies. They engineered solutions for decision paths that other civilizations hadn't even recognized as possibilities yet. Dr. Blackwood, Kess asked, her academic curiosity overriding her obvious anxiety, how many civilizations have accepted your collaboration invitations? All of them, eventually. Dr. Blackwood's answer carried the simple matter-of-factness of someone stating an obvious truth. Though the timeline varies considerably, some species recognize the benefits immediately, others require more extensive demonstration periods. The crystalline collective from Ecominus-31 took nearly 18 months of gradual exposure before they felt comfortable with full integration. Commander Torvin's voice cut through the communication array with barely controlled panic. Dr. Grimm, the Defense Council has authorized Level 7 containment protocols. You are ordered to destroy the portal immediately. Commander, Dr. Blackwood said gently, I'm afraid that's not really feasible at this point. The dimensional modifications we've implemented are self-sustaining and designed to be permanent. But please don't worry, containment protocols are unnecessary when the goal is mutually beneficial collaboration. Tobias pulled up the station's defensive systems analysis and discovered something that made his hands shake. Every weapons system, every containment protocol, every emergency measure their station possessed had been quietly and efficiently disabled over the past 6 hours. How? He asked. Standard integration preparation, Dr. Blackwood explained with the tone of someone discussing routine maintenance procedures. We've found that civilizations adapt more comfortably to interdimensional collaboration when they're not distracted by concerns about defensive capabilities they won't need anymore. The portal array chimed again, more insistently this time, and Tobias realized that the gentle, welcoming energy signatures were gradually intensifying. Not threatening, but increasingly difficult to ignore. Dr. Grimm, Dr. Halfmoon, Dr. Blackwood continued, I should mention that we have several of your former colleagues here who are quite eager to see you again. Kess's color patterns shifted to something Tobias had never seen before, a rapid alternation between deep purple and bright gold that suggested her species' equivalent of existential vertigo. Former colleagues? She asked. Dr. Hendricks from the Centauri Research Station, Dr. Vall from the Outer Rim Survey Project, Professor Martinez from the Advanced Physics Institute. They've all made remarkable contributions to our interdimensional research programs. Dr. Hendricks specifically asked me to mention that the theoretical physics challenges we're working on make her previous research look like elementary exercises. The names hit Tobias like physical blows. All 3 researchers had disappeared during interdimensional experiments over the past 5 years. The official reports had listed them as lost to dimensional instabilities or equipment failures. They're alive, Tobias whispered. Alive and thriving, Dr. Blackwood confirmed. Though alive becomes a somewhat limited concept once you experience the biological integration technologies we've developed. Dr. Hendricks has been exploring consciousness expansion methodologies that allow her to process information at approximately 40 times her previous cognitive capacity. Consciousness expansion, biological integration. The Ecominus-47 humans weren't just recruiting other civilizations, they were transforming them into something that transcended the original species' limitations. What do you do to volunteers? Kess asked, her voice tight with controlled terror. We optimize them, Dr. Blackwood replied, her tone carrying the warm satisfaction of someone discussing a successful project. Enhance cognitive capabilities, extend biological lifespans, integrate technological augmentations that allow for more efficient collaboration across multiple dimensional frameworks. Nothing that changes core personality or values. We found that preserves individual contributions to our research networks. The portal array's harmonics shifted again, becoming more complex, more beautiful, and more compelling. Tobias realized that the sound patterns were designed to trigger neurological responses that made the idea of stepping through the gateway increasingly appealing. Dr. Blackwood, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady, what happens if we choose not to collaborate? The pause before her answer was longer than previous ones, and when she spoke, her voice carried a note of genuine confusion mixed with patient concern. Dr. Grimm, I think you're operating under some fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of choice in interdimensional integration scenarios. The question isn't whether you'll collaborate, the question is how comfortable you want the transition process to be. Commander Torvin's voice crackled through their communication array one final time, distorted by increasing interference from the portal modifications. Dr. Grimm, this is a direct order. Evacuate your station immediately and report to. The communication channel went silent. Commander Torvin has accepted an invitation to tour our administrative facilities, Dr. Blackwood explained with the casual tone of someone mentioning a routine appointment. She was quite interested in our organizational efficiency protocols. Tobias stared at the portal, at the readings that showed 17 interdimensional gateways now fully operational throughout their sector, at the data streams documenting the systematic integration of his entire civilization's command structure. The Ecominus 47 humans hadn't conquered their reality. They had simply made refusal impossible while ensuring that acceptance felt like the most reasonable choice imaginable. The gateway is ready whenever you'd like to begin, Dr. Blackwood said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone welcoming new team members to an exciting project. Your colleagues are waiting, and we have some fascinating research opportunities to discuss. The portal hummed with patient, welcoming energy, and Tobias realized that in the end, the most successful form of conquest was the kind that made its victims grateful for the opportunity to surrender. Behind him, Kess had stopped analyzing data and was staring at the portal with an expression that mixed terror and undeniable curiosity. And despite everything his rational mind was screaming, Tobias found himself taking a step toward the interdimensional gateway that would transform him into something optimized for collaboration with the most successful civilization in known existence. Because Dr. Blackwood was right about one thing, the question wasn't whether they would go through. The question was whether they would go through voluntarily.